The morning my heart stopped, my wife was choosing centerpieces. I remember that because the last thing I saw before the world tilted sideways was her text message on the kitchen counter. 3 white roses or peonies? She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I'd taken my pills. She wanted my opinion on flowers for our son-in-law's promotion party, and that was the most important thing happening in our marriage that Saturday. I'm 63 years old. I built a regional commercial real estate firm from nothing over 38 years, starting with a single strip mall outside Tulsa and ending with 17 properties across 4 states. I know the smell of money, and I know the smell of rot. I know when a tenant is 6 months from bankruptcy by the way they sign their lease. I know when a deal is a trap before the ink touches the paper. But I didn't know my own family. That's the part that still gets me. Even now, sitting here on a porch, in a town where nobody knows my name. Let me back up. That Saturday morning, I'd been having chest pressure for 2 days. Nothing dramatic. The kind of tightness a man my age learns to ignore. The same way he ignores the slow drip under the bathroom sink until the drywall caves in. I'd promised myself I'd call the doctor on Monday. Monday is the great lie of men in their 60s. Monday is when we finally get serious. Monday never comes. I was making coffee when my left arm went heavy. Not pain. Heavy. Like someone had quietly slipped a sandbag inside my shirt sleeve. The mug fell. Coffee everywhere. I remember thinking before anything else that I needed to wipe it up because my wife had just had the floors redone. That's how I knew the marriage was already dead, by the way. A dying man's first thought should not be about hardwood maintenance. I made it to the phone. Called 911. Then I called my wife. She didn't answer. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called my son-in-law of all people, because his promotion party was happening at our house that night, and I figured he'd at least be in the neighborhood. He didn't answer either. The paramedics found me on the kitchen floor with the phone still in my hand. They got an IV in, they got me on a gurney, they got the sirens going. Halfway to the hospital, my heart actually did stop. They told me later it was 22 seconds. I don't remember the 22 seconds. I remember the paramedic who brought me back. A young woman, maybe 25, with a gap in her front teeth. She kept saying my name. She didn't know me, but she said my name like she'd been saying it her whole life. That woman saved my life. My wife was at the florist. At the hospital, they wheeled me straight into the cath lab. A blockage in what the cardiologist later called my widowmaker artery, which is a hell of a name for something inside your own chest. They put in 2 stents. The whole thing took maybe 90 minutes. While I was under, the nurse called my emergency contacts. My wife, my daughter. My son-in-law was listed too, because my daughter had insisted on it the year before, saying it'd be useful, in case. In case of what? She never specified. My wife answered on the 3rd try. The nurse told me about this conversation later, not because she was supposed to, but because she'd been working in cardiac care for 19 years, and she'd never heard anything quite like it. She said it stuck in her like a splinter. The nurse said, "Ma'am, your husband has had a serious cardiac event. He's in surgery now. You should come to the hospital." My wife said, "Is he going to live?" The nurse said, "We expect him to, but the next 24 hours are critical, and family presence makes a real difference." My wife said, "The thing is, we have 120 people coming to the house tonight. It's a very important night for our son-in-law. Could you just call me when he's out of surgery?" The nurse, God bless her, said, "Ma'am, did you hear what I said? He died on the way here. They restarted his heart in the ambulance." There was a pause. The nurse said it was maybe 4 seconds, but it was the longest 4 seconds she'd ever counted. Then my wife said, "Well, he didn't really die then, did he? If they restarted it." I want you to understand something. My wife and I had been married 39 years. We met at a community college in Missouri. She was studying to be a dental hygienist. I was studying nothing at all, just killing time before I figured out what I actually wanted. She wore a yellow sweater the day I met her. I remember the exact yellow, the color of butter when it first hits a hot pan. 39 years, 2 children, 5 grandchildren. A house in the suburbs of Kansas City with a finished basement and a sunroom, and a Japanese maple in the front yard that I'd planted with my own hands the spring my son was born. And when she was told her husband had died and come back, she asked if he'd really died. The nurse said, "Ma'am, I think you should come." My wife said, "I'll call my daughter. Don't call me again before 8 a.m. tomorrow. I need sleep tonight. It's going to be a long night." She hung up. I came out of surgery around 4 in the afternoon. They moved me to the cardiac ICU. I was groggy, dry-mouthed. My chest felt like someone had parked a Buick on it. I asked the nurse if my family was coming. She wouldn't quite look at me. She said they'd been notified. I asked again. She said something would be sorted out soon. I knew then. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough. I dozed off around 6. When I woke up, it was dark outside. My phone was on the little tray next to the bed, charging. Someone, probably the paramedic, had thought to plug it in. I picked it up, 12 missed calls, all from the hospital. Nothing from my wife. Nothing from my daughter. Nothing from my toddler. Opened our family group chat, the one my daughter had set up 3 years ago for important family logistics. The last message in the chat was a photo my daughter had sent at 7:14 p.m. It was a picture of the dining room at her house. My house. The one I'd paid for. A long table with white linen and 3 vases of peonies, and my son-in-law standing at the head of it with his arm around my daughter, both of them laughing at something off camera. The caption said, "Daddy's having a tough night, but the show must go on. Cheers to the new VP." My wife had replied with the champagne emoji. My daughter's mother-in-law, who I'd met exactly twice in my life and disliked both times, had replied, "Sending healing thoughts." But also, congratulations. 16 heart emojis from various cousins and in-laws. Not one person had asked which hospital I was in. I'm going to be honest with you. I cried. I haven't cried since my father's funeral in 1998, and I cried in that hospital bed like a child, not loud. Just steady. The tears went sideways into my pillow because I couldn't sit up enough to wipe them. The nurse came in around 9 to check my vitals. She saw my face. She didn't say anything. She just got a warm washcloth and wiped my cheeks and the side of my neck like I was her own father. Then she sat in the chair next to the bed and held my hand for about 10 minutes. She didn't say a word. She just held it. I'll tell you something. In 39 years of marriage, my wife never once held my hand like that. Not when our kids were born. Not when my father died. Not ever. That nurse, whose name I learned later was Yolanda, gave me more comfort in 10 silent minutes than my wife had given me in 4 decades. Yolanda saved my life a second time that night. Not medically. The other way. Around 10 p.m., I picked up my phone. I called my brother. My brother is 2 years older than me, lives in Phoenix, runs a small accounting practice. We talk maybe 4 times a year. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what happened. All of it. The kitchen floor. The ambulance. The nurse. The group chat. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Where's she right now?" I said, "At the party, at my house." He said, "Okay, listen to me. Don't say anything to anyone tomorrow. Don't react. Don't post anything. Don't even let them see you're upset. You play sick. You play tired. You play grateful. They showed up at all. Can you do that?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Good. I'm flying in Monday morning. Don't sign anything until I get there." I said, "Why would I sign anything?" He said, "Brother, trust me. Don't sign anything." I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The thing I kept thinking was, what did he know that I didn't? It took me about 3 weeks to find out, and another 2 months to assemble the full picture. But here's what I learned. My wife had been having an affair. Not a recent one. A long one. With the man who ran an HVAC company we used as a vendor on 3 of our commercial properties. It had started, as best I could piece together, about 9 years ago. 9 years. There were emails. There were credit card receipts for hotel rooms in cities where I knew she'd told me she was visiting her sister. There was a storage unit she paid for in cash that contained, when my brother and I finally cracked it open, a small filing cabinet of gifts and letters and one rather embarrassing pair of monogrammed silk pajamas that were not in my size. My daughter knew. My daughter had known for years. She'd been getting a monthly allowance from her mother, drawn quietly from a side account my wife had set up using my social security number and a forged signature on the bank application. The account had a balance when I found it of $230,000. My son-in-law, the newly promoted VP, had been promoted because his company was about to be acquired by a holding firm that I, through my real estate company, had inadvertently helped finance through a commercial loan deal 18 months prior. His promotion was a golden parachute. He was about to come into about $4 million in stock, and the timing of the party was not, as it turned out, a coincidence. My daughter insisted on having it at our house because she was already planning, with her mother's quiet help, to move my wife into a condo my son-in-law was buying with the first installment of his payout. They expected me to die. They were genuinely surprised I hadn't. My wife visited the hospital exactly once. On the 4th day, she brought me a tin of cookies from a bakery I don't even like, and stayed for 40 minutes. She spent 30 of those minutes on her phone. The other 10 she spent telling me that the party had been absolutely magical and that I should be so proud of our son-in-law and that I really should consider whether all this stress was worth holding on to a business at my age. She used the word retirement 4 times. She used the words let go twice. I smiled. I held her hand, the way Yolanda had held mine. I told her I was thinking about everything. I told her I loved her. I had not loved her since approximately 9:47 p.m. on the night of the party, but she didn't need to know that yet. My brother arrived Monday. He sat in the chair by my bed with a yellow legal pad and a black pen, and he asked me one question. He asked, "What do you actually want?" I thought about it for a long time. I said, "I want them to know what it feels like." He nodded. He wrote that down. Then he said, "Okay, we can do that." The next 4 months are the part of the story I'm proudest of. Not because of what we did, because of how patient I was. A younger man would have screamed. A younger man would have filed for divorce the next morning and gotten taken to the cleaners by a vindictive lawyer who knew 9 years of secrets. I was not a younger man. I had built my business by understanding that the longest pause in a negotiation is the most expensive one. I learned to sit in silence until the other side cracked. So I sat. I came home from the hospital 9 days later. I let my wife fuss over me for the cameras. I let my daughter cry on my shoulder and tell me how scared she'd been. I let my son-in-law clap me on the back and tell me he was just so glad I'd pulled through. I ate the meals my wife made me. I took the pills the doctor prescribed. I went to cardiac rehab 3 times a week. I was a model patient and a model husband and a model father, and every night, when my wife was asleep, I went down to the basement and worked. The first thing I did was move money. Quietly, legally, through the structure of my own company. The properties were held in a series of LLCs I had set up over the years, and I was the sole member of all of them. My wife's name appeared on nothing related to the business. She had insisted, 25 years ago, that she didn't want anything to do with my boring real estate stuff. I had honored that wish. I had even let her sign a post-nuptial agreement at the time, drafted by my lawyer at her own suggestion, that confirmed her separation from the business. She had signed it laughing, telling me she trusted me completely, telling me she was happy to let me handle the boring things while she handled the home. She had forgotten that post-nup. She'd signed it before she met the HVAC man. I had not forgotten. The second thing I did was hire a forensic accountant, a woman in St. Louis my brother knew from his own work. She was 61, semi-retired, did this kind of thing only when it interested her. The case interested her. She spent 6 weeks combing through every bank statement, every credit card, every joint account my wife and I shared. She found things I hadn't even known to look for. A second storage unit, a safety deposit box, a small life insurance policy my wife had taken out on me 11 years ago, for which she was the sole beneficiary, for which she had been paying the premiums out of an account I had never seen. That policy was for $1,200,000. The third thing I did was talk to a divorce attorney. Not the man my wife and I had used over the years for trusts and estates. A different one. A woman in Chicago who specialized in what she called high net worth exits. I flew there twice, on weekends, telling my wife I had to meet with a tenant. She didn't ask questions. She'd stopped asking questions about my work years ago. The fourth thing I did was the hardest. I went to see my son. I haven't mentioned my son. There's a reason for that. My son and I had not spoken in 11 years. We'd had a falling out. The year he turned 26, he'd wanted to go to art school. I had told him, in language I am not proud of, that he was throwing his life away. He had left. He had not come back. My wife and daughter had taken to referring to him in the past tense at family dinners, the way you might mention a dog that had run away. I had been wrong. I had known I was wrong for about 10 of those 11 years. I had been too proud to call. I called him from a coffee shop in Chicago after my second meeting with the lawyer. He picked up on the fourth ring. He didn't recognize the number. I said, "Son, it's your father." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Are you dying?" I said, "I almost did. I'm not anymore." He said, "Okay." I said, "I was wrong. 11 years ago. I was wrong. 11 years ago. I was wrong, and I have known I was wrong, and I have been too cowardly to say so. I'm saying so now. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to say it out loud to you, on the phone, in my own voice, so you would know." He was quiet for another long time. Then he said, "Where are you?" I told him. He said, "I'm in Milwaukee. I can drive down tomorrow." He showed up the next morning at the hotel. He's 37 years old now. He has a beard. He has a wife. I had never met a kindergarten teacher named, well, I'll just say her name is the most kind name I've ever heard for a person. They have a daughter, my granddaughter, who is 4. I have a granddaughter. I had not known. My son sat across from me in the hotel restaurant and listened while I told him everything. The kitchen floor, the party, the group chat, the plan. When I was done, he said, "Dad, what do you need from me?" I said, "Nothing. I'm telling you because I should have told you a lot of things a long time ago. I am not asking you for anything," he said. That wasn't my question. I started crying again. Second time in 26 years, he came around the table and put his hand on the back of my neck, the way I used to do to him when he was a small boy and had a fever, and he just held it there. We didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, "Tell me when. I'll be there." 3 weeks later, I filed. I had everything ready. The divorce petition, citing adultery with documentation. The civil suit against my wife for the forged signature on the side account. The civil suit against my daughter for the same. A criminal referral to the state attorney's office for the life insurance policy, which my forensic accountant had determined contained at least one material misrepresentation that crossed the line from civil to criminal. A formal letter to my son-in-law's new parent company, informing them that one of their incoming senior executives had been involved in financial coordination with a forged document scheme inside our family, which was not technically illegal on his part, but was exactly the kind of headline a holding company does not want during an acquisition. I served all of it on a Tuesday morning at 9:14 a.m. I had timed it deliberately. My wife was at her weekly Pilates class. My daughter was at the gym. My son-in-law was in a board meeting. The process server reached my son-in-law first because he was in a public conference room with glass walls. I'm told he stood up very slowly, read the papers, sat back down, and asked his colleagues if he could have the room. The colleagues left. He stayed in there alone for 40 minutes. By the time he came out, the news had already reached the holding company. They tabled his promotion that afternoon. They rescinded it formally 2 weeks later, citing pending due diligence. My daughter was served at her gym. I'm told she screamed at the process server in the lobby. Then she called her mother. Her mother did not answer because her mother had just been served on her way out of Pilates, in the parking lot, in her workout clothes, in front of 3 other women from the class. My wife called me 46 times that afternoon. I did not pick up. She came to the house that evening. She used her key. She walked into the living room and found me sitting in my chair, the chair I had been sitting in for 35 years, with my son next to me. She had not seen our son in 11 years. She did not even recognize him at first. When she did, her face went through about 6 different emotions in 3 seconds, and then it landed on the one she'd settled into a long time ago, which is the one where she pretended none of this was her fault. She said, "What is this?" I said. "This is your husband and your son." She said, "I want to talk to you alone." I said, "There is nothing you have to say to me that you cannot say in front of him." She tried anyway. She tried anyway. She tried for an hour. She cried. She raged. She accused me of cruelty. She accused me of betrayal, which was a fascinating choice of word. She told me I was destroying our family. She told me I was being manipulated by lawyers. She told me I was sick, that the heart attack had affected my brain, that I needed help. I let her talk. I had learned in the hospital the power of being held in silence. I did not say a word for the entire hour. When she ran out of steam, I stood up. I walked to the front door. I opened it. I said, "The house is in a trust. The trust was updated 3 days ago. You are no longer a beneficiary. You have until the end of the month to remove your personal belongings. Anything left after that date will be donated." She said, "You can't do that." I said, "I have done it." She said, "I'll fight this. I'll fight every inch of this." I said, "You can. I would expect nothing less. But you will be fighting with no money because the joint accounts have been frozen pending the civil suits and your side account has been seized as evidence. You will be fighting from your sister's spare bedroom in St. Louis because that's the only place I imagine will take you in. And you will be fighting against a man who is not angry anymore." She said, "What are you then, if you're not angry?" I said, "I'm done." I closed the door. The civil suits settled eventually, the way these things do. My daughter agreed to a structured payment plan to return the misappropriated funds. My son-in-law was quietly let go from the acquiring company 3 months after the deal closed. He and my daughter sold their house and moved to a smaller one in a different suburb. They are, as far as I know, still together, which is its own kind of punishment. My wife pled out on the life insurance fraud. No prison time. Probation, restitution, a felony on her record that will follow her for the rest of her life. She lives, last I heard, in a 1-bedroom apartment in St. Louis. Her sister did not, in fact, take her in. The HVAC man stopped returning her calls about 6 weeks after the news broke. Men of that kind tend to like married women specifically because they're married. Once that part ended, his interest did too. I sold the house, not because I had to, because I wanted to. The Japanese maple in the front yard came with the property and could not be moved, and I did not want to drive past it every week for the rest of my life. I sold most of the commercial portfolio too, kept 3 properties for income, and moved out here to a small town in the eastern part of Tennessee that I'd never been to before. I bought a house on a hill with a porch that looks out over a valley. I have 2 dogs now. One is a blooded coonhound who chose me at the shelter. The other is a small mutt my granddaughter named when she came to visit, which she did last summer, with my son and his wife, who is, by the way, the kindest person I have ever known. I see my granddaughter on video call twice a week. She is teaching me how to draw. She is 4.5. She is, in some ways, teaching me everything. I do not speak to my wife. I do not speak to my daughter. My daughter wrote me a letter, about a year after everything, asking for a chance to talk. I have not opened it. It sits in a drawer in my desk. Maybe one day I'll open it. Maybe one day I won't. I haven't decided. The thing I have learned, sitting here on this porch, is that some doors don't need to be kicked open or sealed shut. Some doors you just leave alone and see how you feel about them in a year. Yolanda, the nurse, sends me a Christmas card every year. I sent her one too. I don't know if I will ever fully be able to explain what those 10 minutes of held silence did for me. I think about it sometimes when I'm sitting on my porch in the evening and the valley below me goes dark. In that particular way, valleys go dark, all at once, like a curtain dropping. People ask me sometimes, the few people around here who have come to know my story, whether I regret any of it, whether I should have forgiven, whether I went too far. I tell them this: a man who has a heart attack on his kitchen floor, who dies for 22 seconds in an ambulance, who wakes up to find his wife is at a florist and his daughter is laughing at a dinner party in his own house, has already been given his answer about who his family is. He doesn't owe anyone a second chance. He owes himself a true life. I have a true life now. It started on the day I stopped pretending the old one was working. The Japanese maple, I hear, did not survive the new owners. They didn't know how to prune it. It died the second summer after I sold the house. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because some things only thrive in the hands of the person who planted them, and when that person leaves, they have a right to leave for good. I planted myself in the end. Up here on this hill, and I am, for the first time in a very long time, growing. I sit on this porch most evenings now, watching the valley below me darken in that slow Tennessee way, and I think about cause and effect more than I ever did when I was running a company. In business, I always understood it. You sign a bad lease, you bleed money, you ignore a crack in the foundation, the building falls. But in a family, a man my age can spend 40 years pretending the same laws don't apply. They do. They always did. My wife picked flowers while I died because she had been picking smaller versions of that choice for 9 years, maybe longer. Every hotel room, every forged signature, every quiet allowance to my daughter, every premium paid on a life insurance policy I didn't know existed, each of those was a small seed. The party that night wasn't the betrayal. The party was the harvest. She had grown that moment, leaf by leaf. And when it finally bloomed, she was so used to its smell, she didn't even recognize what she was holding. My daughter learned from her mother. My son-in-law learned from my daughter. None of them woke up one morning and decided to leave a dying man on a kitchen floor. They drifted there, one small permission at a time, the way a boat drifts when nobody bothers to drop anchor. That is the part I have made my peace with. I am not angry at them anymore. I am simply done pretending the boat was tied up. The harder truth is the one I had to face about myself. I drifted too. I let my son walk out the door 11 years ago because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. I let my wife stop asking about my work because it was easier than fighting. I let my daughter become someone I didn't know because I was too busy being useful to be present. Decency requires attention. I had given mine to the wrong things. What I would say to a younger man, if one ever sat down next to me on this porch, is this: be decent, even when nobody is watching. Especially then. Use your head before you use your heart, because a soft heart attached to a sharp mind is the strongest thing a person can carry. And when life knocks you down, get back up slower than you think you should. Healing is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. The 4 months I sat quiet in my own house after the hospital were the most powerful months of my life, and I did not raise my voice once. I lost almost everything I thought I had: a wife, a daughter, a house with a maple tree I planted myself. What I gained was smaller and quieter and worth more. A son I had written off, a granddaughter teaching me to draw, a nurse named Yolanda who held my hand in silence and showed me what love actually looks like. The seeds you plant, you eat. I planted myself somewhere new, and for the first time in a long time, something honest is growing.